So as I was saying, I would be content, I would be okay, I would tolerate things like metal detectors in the interim because society is so insane and you don't want to, and to lessen the risk of crime, etc. slightly. But ultimately, I want to see all these mechanisms of dehumanization, every form of hierarchy, eviscerated in their entirety, because they stem from problems that can be addressed. These problems can be addressed. You know, the notion that all these security measures and all these various dehumanizing measures are necessary for our safety and etc. I've discussed in previous videos extensively that that's utter bullshit. That that the intention of the individuals instituting these measures is not safety, it's control, it's dehumanization, it's complete enslavement. But having said that, there are some real risks. Hence my justification for mild security measures in the interim. But, once the root causes of those risks are addressed, I want to see a society where all of these dehumanization measures are eviscerated in their entirety. As the tyranny escalates, I'm dreaming big, still not doing virtually anything to stop it, or not nearly enough in any case. But I'm sticking to my principles and, in fact, becoming more resolute in them. I'm saying, you know what, get rid of it all. Get rid of the police as an institution which will inherently enforce the status quo and will inherently be oppressive and abusive. Get rid of the government because states have a monopoly on the use of force, and that's unjust, and they commit atrocities like genocide and horrific imperialistic wars, and they take away all our freedoms. Let's non-hierarchalize society. Do away with the corporations. Why should I have to follow someone else's orders? Why should I have to be subjugated under the management? Why should a CEO earn more than I do? Why should someone have the ability to command other people just on the basis of, the family they were born into or the prestigious educational institution that they attended that brainwashed them? Do away with compulsory schooling. Create schooling in your local communities. Create communally run workplaces, or just do away with work entirely and return to nature and forage as was done in pre-civilizational times. I want to see none of this dehumanizing work. I want to see no work as it's typically thought of in our society. I want to see none of these fucking surveillance cameras. I want all the cops gone. I want all the military gone. I want a decentralized, non-hierarchical, community-based, egalitarian, self-sustaining, supportive society where we nurture one another, where we tell stories and laugh, and where we are eternally weary against those encroachments by those that would seek to subjugate others, that those would seek to establish hierarchies and dominate others, those who would seek to, in any fashion, abuse other individuals in any way. That should be stood against resolutely, uniformly, without exception. No abuse, no hierarchy, no injustice, no dehumanization, no violation, period. That's my platform. Call it dogmatic. I'm just trying to maintain the last facets of my humanity as society attempts to excise them in their entirety. And I realize this is, on reflection, rather pathetic, that in a YouTube video I'm stating some sort of manifesto, some sort of platform. Oh, here I am, YouTube, I'm still a human being. Look, YouTube, I'm still a human being while they're destroying the humanity of the vast majority of the population. Look, I can recognize injustice. Wow, what good is that going to do society in the long run? What good is this rant going to do society in the long run? Not a fucking thing. Not a fucking thing unless you take action. Not a fucking thing, maybe even if you do take action. Look at this. I despair. Things seem really fucking hopeless now. Every fucking day. An iris scanner, a biometric scanner, a molestation at the airport. Homeland Security everywhere. These alerts in New York and D.C. that they're rolling out, where the government could take over your phone and alert you to potential terrorist threats. They can send you text messages about potential terrorist threats or natural disaster threats without your consent. They can just appear on your mobile phone, you'll open it, you'll see a text message from Homeland Security. Terror threat raised to X, Y, or Z because actually they're doing away with those red, orange, blue, green terror threats, etc. They're going to instead say between Cherry Street and 16th Street, there is a elevated risk of terrorism. You should stay clear of those areas or be extra weary to report suspicious activity from your local citizenry. The only suspicious activity I've said it before and I'll say it again, is the insanity going on at the top, at the upper echelons of the government, and at the lower echelons with the local police forces being militarized. And here with this Biometrics to Hit U.S. Streets article from Al Jazeera, they point out that and there's already been some surveillance in the works and with local law enforcement agencies, and it comes as a result of this, I believe, $450,000 grant. Hold on a moment, let me read this quote. Massachusetts, for example, was already using facial recognition software, and according to James Walsh, the executive director of Massachusetts Sheriff Department, the state is looking to expand its database with a recent $250,000 grant from the U.S. Justice Department. That's how they make the police state hell ubiquitous. They give the feds grants to local police departments. That last part is mine, starting with that's how they. The rest was a quote from the Al Jazeera article. The feds just want to completely eviscerate our humanity, completely normalize utter surveillance, ubiquitous, everywhere you go, surveillance, everywhere you go, face scans, everywhere you go, molestation, everywhere you go, enslavement, everywhere you go, hell. And you're not going to be able to avoid it. If you don't do something now, folks, and maybe even if you do, you're not going to be able to avoid it. It's going to be everywhere. You're going to be surveilled and tracked and traced and molested and violated and abused everywhere you go. That's the direction. That's the direction we're headed in, folks. That is the direction we're headed in. If you can't see it, just scan the fucking mainstream headlines. Oh, gosh, I lost my train of thought, but, you just must laugh at the sheer insanity after you scream. So, why don't I review a few other of the horrific headlines today. Modesty protected by new airport body scanner. Gotta love the Orwellian nature of that. Yes, somewhat accurate, but nevertheless excessively sugarcoating and Orwellian. We got from the Australian.com.au. Let me read from this piece of phenomenal news. Passengers will be very relaxed about the new full-body scanner at Sydney Airport, insists Federal Transport Minister Anthony Albanese. That's out of Australia. Sydney, Australia. The airport in Sydney, Australia is getting body scanners. And of course they insist that the radiation levels are safe and low. They may be. I'm not going to say for sure they aren't. But they can also very well be dangerous. Certainly in the U.S. when they were introduced, there were warnings from various health officials. Some health officials said it was fine. Some scientists said it was fine. Others said that there's some risk from the radiation. I don't know. These could be different. There could be less risk. There could be... He claims that I believe it's 10,000 times. You'd have to go through one of these 10,000 times to get the amount of radiation that you get in a typical cell phone call. Possible, I can't refute it, but of course government officials lie, so it could equally likely, if not more likely than not, be inaccurate, and they could indeed be dangerous. These are somewhat akin to the new body scanners, the change that is being made in a few U.S. airports. Even as these are initially rolled out in Australia, they are going to just show a generic image, which is far better than showing, in essence, one's nude image. So perhaps there's little privacy concern, but there's still the radiation concern, to some degree anyway, and there's still the fact that you have to put your hands up like a prisoner. You have to stand in this like pseudo cage, this cage-esque structure, and put your hands above your head like you're a prisoner. These gestures, you have to think that they're designed to make us to dehumanize us, because they're very prisoner-esque. They're very degrading. I don't want to have to put my hands above my head like I'm surrendering to an authority figure just so that I can board an airplane. So, the bottom line is, of course, there's no precedent sufficient. There's no sufficient justification for this additional security measure. It seems less dehumanizing than the full body scanners in the United States. But it's still another police state measure that is part of the trend that we're seeing towards the escalation to a complete Orwellian hell that we are currently teetering on the brink of. For your freedom, of course. Orwellian societies are only created for people's freedoms. Nazi Germany was to protect the German people, from those evil Jews that were destroying everything. It's always for your freedom, folks. It's always noble intent. It's always humanitarian. The war in Libya is humanitarian. When Hitler invaded Poland, it was humanitarian. When he annexed Czechoslovakia, it was humanitarian. When the U.S. invaded Iraq, it was humanitarian. When oh god, it's always humanitarian, folks. Don't you understand? It's always for your safety, and it's always humanitarian. When you invade countries and slaughter their people in mass, it's always a humanitarian mission, and it's always to keep us safe. And when you molest people at the airport, and when you insert iris scanners on the U.S. streets, roll them out on U.S. streets, it's always for your safety, and it's always free. Okay, so what other horrific headline did I see today? Millions slaughtered by government? Oh wait, that's going to happen tomorrow. Forgive me, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm predicting the inevitable, seemingly, with the direction that we're headed in. Now we have this fact that this quote-unquote super Congress, as Huffington Post calls it, has been convened. That's 6 Republicans and 6 Democrats that apparently have been delegated, along with the president, with the authority to decide what spending cuts will take place if this new debt ceiling agreement was reached apparently today. And so this special committee, this quote-unquote super Congress, as opposed to having to get a majority for each of these laws, they've delegated this authority to this super Congress, apparently. The article doesn't make it entirely clear whether this the Congress at large agreed and did legitimately, agree to let this select group decide, or whether they just claim the authority. But in any case, it's as opposed they're going to just make apparently unilateral decisions in terms of what cuts to the budget are made. I view that as a negative because I would prefer to have a larger group of people decide rather than this select committee. But I don't know a whole lot about this. I don't know enough about this to really make harsh judgments. So if any of you know more about this Super Congress, please let me know. I've had someone that I know tell me that power of this nature is delegated regularly. Sometimes it's delegated to the president, etc. And this is not entirely abnormal. But the fact that certain media organizations, even just naive, liberal, very not by any vast stretch anti-establishment organizations like the Huffington Post are making a big deal out of it, that fact makes me think that it's a little atypical. It seems negative regardless of whether it's atypical or not, but I don't know quite enough about it. So if any of you could inform me of the details about this Super Congress, I would definitely appreciate that. That's all I have for today. Mobile biometrics to hit U.S. streets. I think we need to develop an underground network of individuals who like quote-unquote medical people to some extent trained in the medical profession, or amateurs that aren't really trained in the medical profession that are willing to do this, to remove people's eyes and give them new eyes that are not able to be scanned by these iris scanners, and also to alter their faces so that they cannot be detected by this facial recognition software. This is depicted in the film Minority Report about this dystopian society where they have ubiquitous iris scanners. And guess what? They're now going to have ubiquitous iris scanners in our society. Just like 1984, just like Minority Report, just like these dystopian hells that are depicted in novels and that 20 fucking years ago were considered to be unthinkable science fiction nightmares are now a fucking reality in our fucking modern society. Wake up, people. Shit is getting really horrendous, and we're going to have all of our humanity eviscerated in its entirety before we know it. Thanks for listening.